Hi, I'm Taylor Davis. This is Andy Paulsen. It's great to have you join us in today's webinar, where we're going to be talking about the sales and retention predictions for the ambulatory and post-acute markets. This is all based off of a predictive model that we've talked about before, and we are so excited to take this model to the next step and actually talk about actual predictions. Before we jump in, we're going to walk through about 10 different market segments that KLAS watches. Before we jump in, we'd like to frame up this discussion in case you haven't watched the video. There's a link to the video where we go in depth about this model. If you're a fellow geek nerd like me, this is a must watch. Like, you just have to go watch this and you're going to have a lot of fun as you watch it. But if you want the quick explanation, we're going to walk through that really quickly, and then we're going to spend very little time on each market segment as we have so many, so we're only going to have about 5 minutes. Andy here is one of our great experts when it comes to the ambulatory and post-acute space. And so we're going to, he's going to give us all the answers once we jump into the to the market data here. A couple other points to remember. Please know that in any predictive model, you're going to have some predictions that are a little bit crazy. And we see some of those in today's prediction set that we see. They tend to be in products that are unique in some way. So if there's a unique background, a niche customer base, something that is very unique to that product, the prediction is either going to be lucky and good, or more likely it's going to look a little bit weird. And it's important to know that that's just how predictive models work. However, even in those cases, there's a lot of insights because this model, we're able to see why the predictions are the way that they are. There's a lot of insights that we can take from this. So before we jump in, let's talk real quick about this model and how does it work and how do we think about this. So first, I want to give just a quick example. Think about any time that you went for a referral of somebody, and I think one that we do all the time, Andy, is we ask about movies, right? And because you do not want to pay $10 and spend 2 to 3 hours of your life in a movie that's not a good movie, right? So, which could destroy an entire evening, right? So,
especially if you're taking your kids, and it's like
yeah,
$40
exactly,
or $50. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah, and a very unforgiving audience sometimes, right? So as you think about when you go ask somebody about a movie, so if I was coming to you and I asked you about a movie, I would never stop. So if I come to you and I said, hey, you saw that movie that we're looking at, right? Mm-hmm. Did you like it? And then you may give me an answer such as, yeah, I absolutely loved it. The conversation never just stops right here, right? Because I have things that I'm looking for in a movie. I have things that I feel like maybe tonight. I have things that I'm wanting. I have things that I care a lot about in movies. So maybe I'm a action and adventure guy, and I like the Fast and the Furious movies, and what I'm really looking for is special effects and cars flying. Maybe I'm somebody who is really looking for really unique dialogue and really interesting things that way. When it comes to a referral, I always am going to ask a why question. So why did you like it, right? And then this is the point where you'll say, the script was really creative, or the special effects were amazing, or the whole movie was creative in a way that I've never seen before. And then I start to think, I map your reasons as to why you like the movie to what I'm looking for, and I make my decision as to whether I'm going to go or not. We believe that in healthcare IT, decisions are fairly similar to even like movie decisions. You're listening. If customers are saying, hey, stay away from this product, then you do. And as we talked about the model, that's what we tend to see happen. But when customers start to say, yeah, I like it, I'm not just looking for a yes, I like it, I'm looking for a why do you like it? And there's common whys that really resonate with customers. So how do we do this? Just want to remind everybody about the idea of question rank. The idea of rank is ranking each question that we asked, each of the rating questions, compared to the other rating questions. So what are the reasons, what are the drivers for your satisfaction? What are the questions that rate the very highest? Well, those are likely some of the reasons why you would tell somebody that you like or I guess on the negative side, dislike a product, right? And so if support was the highest rated question, that would have a rank of 15. So 15 is the highest rank. And that would likely be as I came to you and said, hey, what about that solution? You guys are using that, right? How well does that work? You may say, yeah, it's great. And let me tell you, the support is amazing, right? So a rank of 15 down to a rank of 1 is what we're looking at. We don't give overall satisfaction a rank so that there's continuity between this and the KLAS fingerprint. So what we've noticed is that there's different questions that tend to fall in different places when it comes to rank. No two questions can have the same rank for a product, right? And when we see different questions above certain thresholds, we really see jumps in terms of the sales share and the average retention that we can predict. And here are really 5 key questions that we're going to be keeping an eye on. One is, and the most powerful question is likely to recommend. When we see that at a rank of a 14 or a 15, we see really, really strong sales and retention. And essentially what we're hearing from customers is they're saying, we see this product as a market leader. And when you see delivery of new technology above a 6, we tend to see high sales and retention. That's really an innovation type of question. So that tends to score lower generally, but if we see it even get up into the middle ranks, then we start to say, hey, this is a good indicator. Supports integration goals. We see that range all the way across, but when we see that being in the top third of questions, that's a good sign. Executive involvement, similar to supports integration goals, which is a partnership question. When that's in the top third, that's a good sign. And forecasted overall satisfaction, we like to see that pretty high. So we like to see high optimism. And when we see a product that's about to shed a whole bunch of customers, that's typically one of the last indicators to drop in rank. And so when we see forecasted overall satisfaction drop pretty low, it's an indicator that that might be a product that's about to shed a bunch of customers. So, and I just want to drive in on one of these, especially as we have some areas being ambulatory and post-acute. This model is trained across data in all of healthcare IT. So there's some areas that are a little bit funny, but the one indicator, if you want to look at nothing else, the one indicator that's really powerful to look at is the rank for likely to recommend. And you can see here, given what the rank is on the left-hand side, so this is the rank of last year's data, and then the sales share for this year. And you can see that there's a really powerful trend where if I have a rank of a 1 or a 2, my sales share is well below 1. As I go up to a rank of a 14 or a 15, my sales share is getting really close to a 3. And you're likely to see some really powerful runaway sales. Similar with retention, your retention rate can be 5x lower when your rank is down at a 3 or less. And as you get up to a rank of a 14 or a 15, we tend to see really high retention. So this is a signal in the data that's really powerful. And this is the one signal that we think we see across pretty much all markets that we really keep a good eye on. So I think I've talked enough, Andy. Let's jump into ambulatory and post-acute. And let's talk about these markets and spend a few minutes on each. And you're on our analyst team. I know that if we don't dive into these enough to the satisfaction of our audience, our team is excited to work with you on this and to go deeper and to talk about what some of these may mean for you. So
yeah, we love working with vendors one-on-one. We love going into the data, going deep and helping them understand what they can do to drive change. And yeah, this is the opposite of a deep dive. It's going to be very quick, but we're excited to show the data that we have right now and hopefully get people more interested in learning about their own data. That's great.
So ambulatory EMR is a market that we've watched for a long time. We're really looking at the larger ambulatory EMR. So This is 10 plus physicians, right? Mm-hmm. And KLAS tends to get the largest sizes, right? And we've watched a lot of decisions. We've got an interesting player. So there's some of the players that you would expect with high predicted sales, like an Epic or some others. This year, we're also seeing NextGen really on the rise, and that's in line with them. We would call it maybe a turnaround in a lot of ways, right? And so walk us through some of the predictions and some of the exciting things that we're seeing in the ambulatory EMR market.
Yeah, so as you can see here, ambulatory is going to be a little bit different from acute care in that it's a lot more volatile, it's a lot more vulnerable, it's more subject to change and flip-flopping. It's not as secure as you're going to see in the acute care. We do have some of the main players: Epic, Meditech, NextGen, Athena Health. They have high sales potential as well as retention going for them. It's a very crowded market though, and we jump in, we see all the vendors. You can see why it's really easy for providers to have these choices and to switch around and to not be as satisfied because there's just so many options. But when we look in here, you'll see that the predictions that Taylor was talking about really lead to either retaining those customers or being able to gain new customers. So as you can see on here, there's no surprise with Epic. They're a consistently high performer. So you can see on the y-axis versus the x-axis. The x-axis is their previous history of their sales. So if they had low sales, they're going to be more towards the left. High sales, they're going to be more towards the right. And this is based off the data that we have for showing their sales. But then you can see the predicted sales, what we've gotten from our predictive sales model, showing what we think they're going to be doing in this next year. One of the interesting things that you talked about is this next-gen healthcare. Previously, not seeing a large number of observed sales, but predicting that they're going to be jumping up. And if you want to go to the next slide, some of the things that we can see here is they have really high likely to recommend scores. So while their executive involvement is lower, it may not be that strong of a partnership with what we want to see. They're consistently delivering new technology. They're above that 6, and then people they feel like it's a strong offering, and they're excited to tell their friends about it. So it's exciting to see them just continue to grow. I think it's been since 2018. They've just been consistently improving. They got the most improved award for a provider offering, and then they just continue to go with that.
Well, this is really interesting. So as we look at this and as we talk about likely to recommend, there's a real disparity here, right? So you've got Athena and Epic, but you also have you have a few players that are on the higher end, and then a number of players that are in that 2 or 1 rank. Mm-hmm. And essentially customers are saying, as they say this, hey, I feel like I'm partnered with a market laggard, right?
Yeah.
So you have a lot of folks that are on what customers feel to be a little bit of an older solution. And if I'm one of these vendors that has a 2 or a 1 in the likely to recommend, this is a little bit of a wake-up call, mm-hmm. right? And maybe you're already seeing it in terms of sales, in terms of seeing where things are at. But right now, your current customers may be out talking and saying, yeah, we don't see this as really a leading solution, and possibly not one that you want to take a look at, right?
Yeah, and that you can see on the money's worth rank, you talked about this in the other video, but having a higher money's worth rank isn't necessarily going to be good for helping you increase your sales.
Yeah.
It kind of leads towards being towards the end of the value of the product. That they've gotten what they want out of it. They feel like it was affordable. They used it, but they're not excited to tell their friends about it.
Yes. So one other thing that I think that we should call out is that you have one other player here that right now we're hoping to see in a turnaround. Well, we're hoping to see mm-hmm. anyone who scores low or has challenges with current customers in a turnaround. But this year's Most Improved Award in the ambulatory side went to Greenway.
Yeah.
And we're hoping there's a lot more communication from some of their leadership teams. So we're hoping to see them do a turnaround. And hopefully, like we're seeing with Next Gen, as you do a turnaround, then there comes a point where that really starts to be rewarded by increased market energy and sales, right?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Well, let's look at some of the retention predictions. So you see a few where, let's focus in on Cerner. It looks like Cerner is possibly dropping some here. And so having some stronger retention in the past, but now the prediction is a little bit lower. Mm-hmm. Walk us through why would the market be pointing to that for Cerner? Most everybody else is on sort of the main trend line, but help us understand why Cerner would maybe be predicted to be a little bit lower.
So you can see here, Cerner has a couple offerings. Their supports integration is really high, so it's working well, and this is expected because a lot of people who have Cerner with their ambulatory products also have it with their acute care.
Yes.
So having that is just automatically going to help them work together. However, if you see their delivery of new technology, that's low we want to see it above 6 to be exciting about it. So they're not getting as much of that feeling of being an innovator, of continuing to progress, of continuing to get better. That coupled with their lower forecasted overall satisfaction scores, there's not a lot of hope that it's going to keep getting better.
Okay.
And because of that, it's working well, it's integrating with their current acute care EMR, but it's not going to get better, and maybe that functionality just isn't that great, so we're seeing that low likely to recommend score for them.
So these videos are for vendors only. That's the only group that we're sending these out. Mm-hmm. So if I'm Cerner, I want to look at this and say, hey, we really need to address what is the optimism that customers have for our future? There's a lot of changes going on at Cerner, right? What is the optimism that customers have for our future? And also, what is the innovation that they see coming out of us? Similarly, when you look at the likely to recommend, very low, right? So how do we help our customers feel like they're really using a market-leading solution? Today, customers are indicating that they don't feel like that's what they're having, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing about Cerner is that depending on the market segment, their executive involvement score changes rapidly. We'll see in some of these, their executive involvement score is at the top. It's at 14 or 15.
Yes.
And that shows strong partnership, and it's also a lot of times correlated with helping them view you as an innovator.
Yes.
So even if your technology is not where you want it to be now, if you're communicating that roadmap with them, that helps just increase that optimism. So that increases your forecasted overall satisfaction and increases your executive involvement. So in some of them, Cerner's done really well. In this one, it's not as high as we'd like to see, that executive involvement, which is not helping their delivery of new technology score, that innovator feeling.
Yes.
If they could help their customers understand the roadmap, understand the improvements that are coming, and be more involved, I think that would really help improve their likely to recommend and just their overall sales potential.
Okay. Well, this is really interesting. Thank you for walking us through this, Andy. All right, Andy, let's jump into specialty EMR. So this is a market, there are more players here than what we measure. And these are ambulatory EHR vendors who specialize in specific specialties, right?
Yep.
And we've watched this area for a while. It's interesting. For instance, I had a call with an investment firm the other day. They were asking about a number of different players in the market. And as we were walking through different players, we mentioned modernizing medicine. And me and the analysts who were on the phone, we both said, now this is a firm that is the real deal in terms of really delivering to their customers and driving a lot of success. We see that in their likely to recommend, but we still see lower overall predictions. Help us understand maybe what the model's seeing when it comes to this market.
Yeah, so this segment is going to be a lot different from the previous one that we stated, and it's mainly because of the reason why they're purchasing this product. You know, it's a very specialized product. You have a surgery center, you have something that needs a specialized product, a pediatrics clinic, and you know more what you're looking for. So it's not going to be as volatile.
Yes.
It also can lead to less innovation. You know, if there's less of a reason to distinguish yourself from other competitors, there's going to be less of this reason to continually try and innovate.
Yep.
And we see that with the low scores here for the delivery of new technology. And it's really only modernizing medicine that's breaching that threshold of getting above 6, and that's why we're seeing them have a lot more of that market share.
Okay.
It's still keeping up with that innovator persona.
Well, this is interesting. So you also see likely to recommend. They're a 14. We have some other moderately high likely to recommends. But if, for instance, if I'm PCC and I'm looking at this, I may say, hey, you know, we have an opportunity to be more of a market leader. How do we position ourselves? Our team would be excited to talk to PCC about that.
Yeah.
Also, Office Practicum, you could have some of the same conversations, right? But then, as you mentioned, the innovation piece. How do we be more innovative? How do we be more frontline in terms of what we're doing with that, right? So some opportunities that you have some other players here that they can seize and position themselves in hopefully a better way in the market, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing to keep in mind is this is also different from the other ambulatory segment we just saw. This has a much higher overall average score than the other one. So
yes.
Just because they're ranked low in a certain area here, it's not that they're scoring poorly necessarily. It's just it's not as front of mind for them.
Yeah.
So helping to keep that innovative feeling front of mind just helps to make sure that you're being more competitive and more known in the market.
And there's some of this where the model is just probably not as tuned to this market as maybe it is, as maybe it needs to be, right? So take some of these with a grain of salt, but also take the insights that you can from this. Let's talk about some of the retention predictions. They seem to be fairly in line with what we've seen over the last couple of years. So you have Expertise that hasn't seen near as much retention. You have PCC and Modernizing Medicine who have done a very, very good job of holding on to their customers, and the model is predicting them to continue to have that, right?
Right. Yeah. So not only do they have strong likely recommend scores, but I mean, if you see with PCC, very high forecasted overall satisfaction. So that's just a huge indicator that they're going to be able to retain those customers.
And one thing to take a look at is with PCC, supports integration goals is a 1. So there is a challenge in terms of, a lot of times these conversations are around integrating into the overall framework of the region, integrating into the health system in the area, right? So there's opportunities to improve in that, and luckily there are opportunities today to better improve with a care quality, with a Commonwealth. There are opportunities to better tie into the ecosystem out there. So.
Yeah. Well, and it also goes into why did they buy this product? I mean, a lot of these specialty ones, they know it's not going to integrate probably with the acute care EMR in their hospital, but they still want the product. So it's just not top of mind for them.
Yes.
And them scoring in the 90s, it's hard to do that if you have a really low integration score. So it's not saying that they have a terrible score. It's just that's not front of mind for them right now.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Let's jump over and talk about one other sort of peripheral, ambulatory but critical ambulatory market, which this is ambulatory surgery center solutions. You see, how do you explain Provation's low executive involvement score relative to likely to recommend? Anyway, it feels like this is maybe another market where the model maybe is not all the way tuned, but there's some really interesting insights in terms of what we're seeing, right?
Yeah. So what we're seeing with Provation, executive involvement, it's not very high. This is one of those things where we talk about there's just some different factors that can affect it that we don't account for in the model.
Yes.
I actually recently worked with Provation, and they're going through completely revamping their main offering.
Okay.
This is that Provation Apex offering, and they're trying to get their customers to shift over, and they basically under this one product have 2 different products.
Yes.
And they're just in this transition. Everybody's satisfied with what they can do. The functionality scores really high, but it's just that understanding how do we update our customer service model? How do we make sure we're caring for both these customers the same? They don't necessarily have terrible executive involvement scores, but they do have a really high disparity in how people view it. So that's causing that to be lower on that rank. And
you've got a few customers pulling it down.
Yeah.
On that question.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay.
And that can be the case that all these vendors need to take into consideration when they're doing upgrades, when they're doing new offerings, is how is that going to change the perception of your different customers, and how can you make sure that everybody's going to be more unified in their feelings towards you?
Okay, that's great. Provation on the other side, though, the only one with a relatively high supports integration goals rank. And then as we look, surgical information systems, highest on the delivery of new technology rank, and also highest on likely to recommend rank. So a couple things, you would expect that this is a quantification of the conversations happening between potential and current customers. Likely that some of the surgical information systems customers are saying things such as, yeah, they're pretty innovative, and yeah, we really feel like they're one of the best products on the market, or the best product on the market, right?
Yeah, and you'll notice in the segment you don't see any of the acute care players that are listed here. We don't have Epic having an offering here right now.
Yep.
And that's huge for if you can integrate with those main players in the acute care and the main players in the hospital. That's going to help drive up your perception of the functionality, the ease of use, and other categories that just help you be a stronger player and raise your score.
Okay. No, very interesting. Let's take a look at retention. Now, this is where the model predicts a little bit differently than what we've observed over the last little bit. But you do have a lot of players with pretty high satisfaction, and we're expecting to see surgical information systems continue to hold on to a lot of their customers. But any other insights on the retention side for this market?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit before, but the delivery of new technology is lower for most of them. So, I mean, with Provation, they have a higher perception of the utility of the product, but they want to see that it continues to grow.
Yep.
We talked about this earlier, but they also had a very low executive involvement, which hurts your communication to your customers of where the product's going.
Okay.
So being able to continually communicate your roadmap is just going to help improve your ability to gain new customers and retain the ones that you have.
Yes. Okay. Well, this is great. There's so much to unpack here that we really can't stay forever on all of these markets, but there's a lot of conversations here. Let's talk about patient intake management now. So this is really interesting. You have Epic that obviously has a very strong footprint in the market. You have Pharesia, who is competing well historically. We've seen them take a lot of market share in this area, but integration is a really big concern here, right? A key concern. So walk us through what we're seeing in this market and some of the dynamics that we're seeing here.
Yeah, and one thing to understand is those products who don't also do EMR are always going to probably be at a disadvantage compared to the products that also do EMR, because a lot of times it's, well, who's our EMR? Okay, what can we add on?
Yes.
That's just going to be a leg up. So in order for someone to compete, they have to be very innovative.
Yes.
They have to show that, hey, even though we're not an add-on, we're a separate product, we have what you need. And that's being able to show that and stay competitive is really cool. So it's exciting to see Phreesia be competitive like that. One of the things that they did was really interesting is when COVID hit, they dove headfirst into how can we make our product COVID friendly. So introducing functionality into the product for how to screen COVID patients, how to deal with it differently, how do we update this, and their customers really responded well. So that's why you see a high innovative score for them and a high likely to recommend.
Interesting. So yeah, the highest likely to recommend and the highest innovation, and that's a great story to know where that comes from. At the same time, if I'm Phreesia, I'm looking at these supports integration goals as a 1, and already we've heard some feedback from customers about this. This is something that's needed, and this is a major concern that I need to be focusing on, right?
Yeah. Well, and one of the other things to look at is look at their money's worth. That's pretty high, especially for the low median years live. You know, that's something that we would more likely see if they'd been with them longer. We felt like they were more towards the end of their product life cycle. But I think what we're seeing is they know that they're not integrating as well as Epic's going to be, and they're probably saving on their cost for that. Or they're probably still, even with the other technology that they're getting, feeling like this is a really good value.
Okay. And then as we look at OTEC, likely to recommend very low, so a concern there, right? If you're there at OTEC, but also satisfaction is very low, so a very different player than the other two, right?
Yeah.
And so if we look at retention, not a surprise that we would expect to see Phreesia and Epic both with high retention, and OTEC with very low predicted retention. So probably not too much of a surprise here.
Yeah, and unfortunately for OTEC, that's kind of been the story of the past few years. It's just been on a downward climb, or not downward climb, a decline.
Yes.
And honestly, you know, for them to turn it around, we really want to see them show their customers that they're an innovative product, that they can compete, and that they have a roadmap for where they're going with their technology.
Okay. Well, this is really insightful. Let's talk about practice management while we're talking about ambulatory solutions here. And obviously a key part of the ambulatory suite. Help us understand what some of the dynamics are in this market, and is there a lot of differences between what we're seeing here and what we're seeing in the ambulatory EHR market?
There's not a ton of differences, no. We see this product purchased mostly simultaneously with their EMR, or with the ambulatory EMR. So we see here that there's a lot of forecasted overall satisfaction. So the people that are with them, they trust that it's going to keep being a strong offering because they also have the EMR offering to go off of. When we do see a difference, it's usually a bad sign, because if your ambulatory product is doing well, but your practice management one is not doing well, the customers are noticing that difference. That means something is really sticking out that's hurting that offering. Because a lot of times you don't want to split up those products if possible.
So we continue to see Epic and Athena, so not a surprise there,
right.
Long-standing, strong practice management players, right? And you see Cerner with the rising predicted sales, which is interesting. On the ambulatory side, they were on the falling predicted sales. However, there's a lot of Cerner customers who don't have their practice management today, right? Yeah. So there's some sales going on with customers who have their ambulatory, where it's coming up right now in terms of how many sales that we're seeing there, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, not huge surprises in terms of some of the different players, but anything that jumps out really strongly on any of these players that really catches your eye, Andy?
Well, one of the things that I was talking about earlier is that when you look at Cerner, their executive involvement, and that's out of 15. So they're making a huge push to be more in tune with what their customers want, and help really meet their needs. So I think that's why we're seeing that increase in the sales for them. We hope that continues over into the retention, but it's pretty obvious that they want to be in tune with what the customers want.
Yes, they're trying, but customers are still giving a likely to recommend of a 2. So in time, you'd really like to see likely to recommend go up. And if you had to pick one of those 2 indicators, just from a mathematical perspective, but also even just from the intuition of it, you'd rather be known as a market leader than somebody where the vendor is constantly involved. In some ways, because the score is a 68, and there continues to be some challenges there, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you do have a lot of problems, the customers are going to be escalating to the executive involvement.
Yes, exactly.
So that can be on the flip side of it. But if you do have the problems, you also want to be involved to be able to fix them.
Yes. Okay. So as we look at some of the other on the retention side, again, fairly similar to what we were saying. Anything that stands out here to you on the retention side?
No. Again, I just want to mention, we saw NextGen increase a lot. They're not increasing a lot in their retention. We saw them increase in their sales, but with the retention, we see them holding steady, and that goes to that overall satisfaction. You can see they're rated at 15.
Yep.
So being able to keep that in that top spot is just huge for being able to retain your customers.
Okay. Well, let's jump over and talk about the home care space. Now, this is an interesting market, home health, where we have seen really a pretty seismic disruption over the last little bit, right?
Yeah.
And you have Home Care Home Base, who previously was a real market leader in the large space, and hopefully will become a market leader again, but they've really seen a fall from grace, and you see that both in the KLAS scores. You also see that in the predictions today. So there's an opening. Home Care Home Base still continues to be very considered by the very largest of organizations. However, they're not being considered as enthusiastically as they were considered before. And so they have a lot of robust functionality, but you have some other players that are really coming up. So help us understand, who are some of the possible disruptors in this space?
So you see Epic having a newer offering in here. They're jumping into that space, and they've really been able to grow a lot. So they lead the pack with sales and retention right now.
Okay.
And obviously, being able to integrate with the other products, if you have a home health solution that's an extension of your hospital offering, Epic, like I said before, it's just going to have that leg up. But also, Epic knows that it's a newer product for them, and they have really high executive involvement scores. They're letting people know their roadmap. They're helping them understand how Epic's going to keep growing, and it really works for them.
And we should say also that there's something unique with Epic in a model like this, because the model has an assumption that it's the same type of customer in the potential customer pool as is in the current customer pool. However, Epic customers are a little bit of a unique mix. They're much more likely to be a health systems home health offering, whereas a lot of the other home health opportunities out there are standalone. So in this case, this may be one where we see the model possibly predicting off. And we see this as we talk to some of the standalone home health organizations who say, we're not large enough, and we just don't have the money to go invest in Epic. However, if it's part of your health system, which is what we're seeing here from these current customers, then it becomes something where for current Epic customers who are adopting it, likely to recommend is a 13. Nobody else is nearly as high, right? So the model is predicting that very high. Let's talk a little bit. It's interesting to see Matrix Care showing up with one of the other, and WellSky showing up with 2 of the other highest predictions. However, Matrix Care also has a higher KLAS score, and likely to recommend is a 10. So you don't see, except for those Epic customers, you don't see anybody else with that really high likely to recommend. So again, we're missing a market leader in some ways, but you've got a couple of possible disruptors with Matrix Care, and possibly with WellSky also, if they can improve their average delivery, right?
Yeah, and well, something that wouldn't show up on this model with Matrix Care is they recently acquired some Brightree products, and they've added that into their long-term and their home health care.
Yes.
So we've seen that, especially in the long-term care, which we'll get to in a second, have a huge jump in their sales from what they were before, as well as just being able to have their foot in the game. I don't know. Yes.
They're showing up more. And this Brightree product is interesting. You're right. It was a few years ago that the Matrix Care acquired them. It's been really exciting. So we've seen that product go with a KLAS score as low as in the 50s.
Yeah.
And now today they're up in the 80s, and the experience is quite strong. And as you can see here, delivery of new technology is really strong. So customers are saying, hey, they're moving forward. They're really aggressive. And when you see stronger delivery of new technology than even likely to recommend, it takes your breath away a little bit. So this is a product that is moving forward in the eyes of customers quite a bit, and one that could be a possible disruptor moving forward. So an interesting product to watch. As we look at retention, most of the retention predictions are fairly in line with what we've been seeing. However, you've got so you have Epic, where there's high predicted retention. You have Matrix Care. Then you have some of the others where there's low predicted retention. This feels similar to what we're seeing in the likely to recommend. You don't have a lot of customers who are saying, hey, we really feel like we're on the premier product in the market, right?
Yeah.
And so there continues to be a lot of opportunity in as much as there's some fluidity in this market. And sometimes just the amount of money in this market makes it so that fluidity is down. But there's opportunity to disrupt in this market. Is that similar to what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just in this market too. I mean, there's a lot of competitors who they know they're not the premier one. They know they can't compete exactly the way that maybe Epic or some other competitors are.
Yes.
But they're still striving to be more innovative and striving to show the value that they can offer at a lower cost. So you might see those value scores go up with them.
Yes.
Even though it's not the best offering, that's how they're choosing to compete.
Okay. Well, this is really helpful. Let's talk about the sister market here with Hospice. And obviously, we're seeing some similar trends here. Are there any differences that are very notable when it comes to Hospice?
The one thing you see here is Epic on the sales. They're high, but we weren't showing high observed sales before. So we show them just exploding as new growth in this market.
Yep.
And we'd expect the next year they'd be well over on the right side for continued high sales, but that executive involvement, that ability to integrate is just proving to be what customers want.
Yeah.
And being able to consolidate, that's been huge for them.
With the caveat being that this is similar to what we talked about on the home health side. So in the standalone market, a lot less likely to see Epic, and the model is probably maybe a false positive when it comes to some of the predicted sales.
Exactly.
When you get outside of Epic Health Systems, right? So, but it is notable in those places where Epic does have a footprint in the health system. Very notable that executive involvement is so high, which indicates that there's a lot of focus from Epic in order to make this very strong. So as we see some of the other predictions, you see WellSky with very low predicted sales, and Home Care, Home Base, and Matrix Care both have opportunities to get better. Neither of them have an extremely high likely to recommend rank, and especially when you start looking at integration and executive involvement, there's still some opportunities there for them to position themselves even stronger, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Especially like what you're saying, being able to integrate without having the leg up of being that EMR that might be tied to the acute care.
Yes.
That's going to be what's going to help them be competitive.
Yeah. Okay. And then in the hospice space, the predictions are similar to what we've seen in the past, right?
Yeah.
So we expect more of the same in terms of retention. Matrix Care, Epic, likely to continue to have some of the same retention, right?
Yeah, I mean, Epic, Matrix Care, 15 for the forecasted overall satisfaction.
Yes.
That's putting them up there with Epic. Epic, I'm actually surprised that the forecasted overall satisfaction isn't as high with how far up they are. But like you said before, that could be skewed by, Epic being in Epic facilities.
Yes, yes. Okay, well, this is fascinating. Let's jump over to long-term care, another area in the post-acute. You mentioned before that there's been a jump in sales for Matrix Care. Does the model help us understand some of what's going on in the space with that?
It can. There are some caveats with it.
Please.
But being able to see that there's the high delivery of new technology scores, that shows that Matrix Care acquiring a new product, I mean, not super new, but merging and getting Brightree, being able to put together a more complete offering and then sharing that with their executive involvement, that helps position them to be someone that's as competitive or even a better option depending on your price range than Epic might be.
Okay. And you also have point-click care in this market that's been a very strong player for a long time. And we can see in the model indicates some of the reasons why they show up as a strong player. So likely to recommend at a 13 very strong indication that customers are saying, hey, we really feel like we're partnered with a premier solution. You see a high satisfaction score also. So when we talk about that conversation, it's likely to say, hey, do you like point-click care? We love point-click care. What do you like about it? We've looked at everything on the market. We think that they're probably the premier solution on the market. And even as you look at delivery of new technology at a 10, very, very high. What makes them so good? Hey, they're very innovative, right? So you could even start to understand what some of the conversations are that customers are having when you look at some of these ranks. And point-click care predicted to continue to be a very strong player in the market.
Yeah, and going back to your movie analogy, when you're talking about why you like the movie, I think it's also important to know like who you're talking to.
Yes.
For example, if I ask my wife what movie she likes, I know I'm not going to agree with her. And that's the thing with these different market segments. Those who are entrenched in long-term care and these ancillary products, they know what's important. So them recommending for having that similar background is really how we know that it's going to be a strong offering, because they know specifically for long-term care, this is what we want, and this is the product that's doing it.
Okay, this is really helpful. As we look at retention predictions, fairly similar to what we think that we've seen in the past, right? So point-click care, matrix care, Epic, high retention in the past. Cerner, CPSI, we've seen lower retention in the past, and we expect that to continue, especially with CPSI possibly having some low retention. There's some challenges there, right?
Yep, and then also with Cerner, I mean, I've pointed this out before, but you just see the variety in not only their executive involvement scores, but their supports integration, and they're likely to recommend. Based on the market segment, it just bounces around. And here we don't see very high scores.
Yes.
And then we also see just that low prediction of where they're going to go in this market segment.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the big money market segment, right? So if there is any market where people are willing to pull out the checkbook and write big checks, it's behavioral health, right? And I am of course kidding as I say that. So this is a very price sensitive market, and we continue to see this is lower scoring segment. There's a lot of challenges in this market. What does the model help us understand in this fairly unique market with different drivers when it comes to sales reasons why people are buying?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there with talking about the price point here. Not a lot of people will get into behavioral health just on their own. They just add it to bring in more and to add a more complete offering. So integration is a huge part for it.
Okay.
Being able to say, hey, we're easy to work with, we're easy to add on. It's not going to be complicated. That's going to be what drives them, as well as showing that they are innovative, that it's worthwhile for them to jump in. So delivery of new technology has been a huge strength for this market too.
Okay. So it's interesting, you do see Cerner, and this is again that situation where we talked about with Epic, where for organizations using Cerner who have a behavioral health, we would expect those to continue to adopt Cerner if they're going out to market and in an RFP. Other than that, you really don't see a really strong player when it comes to predicted sales in this market. And also when you look at the KLAS scores, you don't see anybody who's really a real strong standout in this market, right? So everybody is kind of a C- or below when it comes to the experience that current customers are having, a very hit and miss type of experience in this market, right?
Yeah, also you can see with Cerner, I mean, what is it? It's 14 for supports integration goals.
Yes.
So that's a big component, obviously, because they're going with other Cerner products, but that's what's helping them get the high sales, is that it's an easy add-on.
It ties in. Yeah. Yep. Okay. And then as we look at retention, some similar trends. So if you are a Cerner organization, fairly likely that you may hold on to it in part because of that integration. But if there was money to create some of the market fluidity, we would expect that there would be some customers that would possibly be leaving from a Credible, from a Qualifax, from a NetSmart. However, today we're not seeing a lot of people switching their systems today, right? Just because it's just not an area where you have a lot of money to go invest in the newest and the greatest, right?
Yeah, it's not front of mind.
No, it's not front of mind. And for some of the caregivers who have to use this and are struggling, it's a challenge for them. But justifying these type of jumps is difficult for this market, right? So, well, Andy, this has been really helpful. Really interesting, a set of really interesting markets, and it's fascinating to look and to see how these different markets have evolved and how they're evolving. We'll come back this next year and hopefully see how some of these predictions played out. and continue to make these predictions better. We're excited to talk to any of the vendors who are watching this today as you have additional questions, to go more in depth with you, to talk and connect this to the feedback of your customers, also connect it to the initiatives that you have right now as a company as you're trying to improve. So we're excited to continue the dialogue on this. Thank you so much for joining us in today's webinar.
Thank you.